So far, we kind of avoided the topic of events in React because they're a little bit different than how you would work with it normally. But in this lecture, we're going to reveal how you would actually do these type of things inside of React. We're going to talk about event bubbling and how do you bubble them, because you're manually going to bubble events whenever you need them. We're going to see how we do that through passing properties that have callbacks instead of triggering the standard JavaScript event bubbling that I'm sure you're familiar with from your work in general. So let's see it in action. All right, we created a basic navigation, but I really want to move into a more dynamic world. And to do that, I want to go ahead and create a model for our view, for our menu as well. So let's go ahead and just place this all the way up here. I'm going to call this nav. And for our nav itself, just for now, it's really a nav model because we're probably going to go back to it and change it again. But let's go ahead and figure out what will be the content within. So first of all, if we go into our nav, we have basically 4 items of content. We have 4 navigational items where one of the links is echoed twice. It's echoed also in that nav bar on the top with some copy. Sometimes it's with, sometimes it's without. So literally right now what we have here is a link and a value. A link and a value is really the differentiator, where this is something that the first item we could say is always invisible. So in our data itself, what we really need, if we go into our client, we basically need a structure that's similar to link name, just like we had previously. So if I go ahead here and just copy a couple of those, so we have a link and a value, and I'm going to go ahead into our link name combination and just assign the correct value. So first of all, for our link, our first item is going to be this href that is right there. And if we go back into our navigation, that was our title. So let's just put that title where the name is. And let's literally just go through this flow and move by updating. We have portfolio and portfolio, portfolio, and portfolio. What else do we have here? We have about and about. It's about time that we have an about and about and about. And we are about done, right? Almost done. We have also contact. So let's go ahead and copy contact. Beautiful. So we created our model. Now that we have our model, let's just also link it to the models that are being sent. So I'm just going to set this, I'll call this nav, and I will send in our navigational model. And let's go into our app now and send our nav item. So I'm just going to go ahead here and send that data through into the nav data, which is going to be our this.props.data.nav. And let's go into our nav and structure it so it will actually work the way we expect it. So first of all, the first thing that we were going to do is we're going to link in that right default link, which is inside of our nav bar link. Now, the best way for me to do this is probably to just strip out the first item. So I'm just going to create here a LED, and let's just call this, so let's just give it a name such as, let's say, first data, and it's going to be this props data position 0. Okay, so that's good. And let's also copy all the rest. So let's call the rest, let's just call it A for our array, because it's just our data, props data. And I'm just going to go ahead and slice out everything from position 1 and onwards. Okay, so now that we have our data structure, let's first put in our first data point. And our first data point, we could literally just go ahead here and replace our content that we have here with our data structure, which was our first data dot name was for the name, and we had dot link for the link itself. So first data dot link. Beautiful. Now for our first item, we kind of want to keep it unique and different. So I'm just going to keep it the way it is, but I'm just going to send in our link itself instead of having it hard coded here. And then this remains the same. Now for our nav items, what I want to do is I want to list them in dynamically. So to do that, what I would like to do is I want to cycle through our A that we have here and replace its content with content that would actually fit our rendering. So we already created really those nav items. So all I really need to do is loop through our A. So I'm going to use a for each to do that. And I'm going to send inside of it a arrow function. So its properties for each expect an element, an index, and the array itself. So we got ourselves our beautiful for each. And in it we have our arrow function. It looks really weird, but incredibly efficient. Okay, so what do we want to do? We want to go to the element and we really want to replace it with what? We want to replace it with a nav item. So if I go ahead here, let me just grab one of those nav items and just place it in there instead. But what I want to do is, instead of sending this content directly, I'm going to use that ... syntax that we saw previously and send inside that element, because it's going to loop through item by item. Last but not least, I also want to make sure that I set here a key that is unique. So to do that, I'm going to use the elements link, which is unique. So that would give me a unique element here, for unique, by the way, for this zone. So it doesn't have to be an ID that is unique for the whole application. It just needs to be unique in the structure, in the current tree that you're at, which in our case it would be. No one would ever put two menu items. Well, in our situation, no one would. If not, we would have to create a link, such as just putting here a number or something of the sort, but this would work for us. By the way, our index is unique as well, so I could go ahead here and just set it to be our index. That's unique. Okay, so it really doesn't matter the value itself as long as it is unique. Let's continue. So now that we've created it, all I really have to do is find where would I position it, which would be right after our hidden item. And then I could go ahead here and just delete all of that. And instead of that, position our array that we've just created. Now, if everything worked according to plan, then we should re-render. But let's see, we have here a small little problem. So first of all, we're getting here that our JSX is not closing well, so that I is not working for its needs. So it needs to be quoted. Oh yeah, of course it needs to be quoted. If I go ahead here, I need to put that inside of brackets, because if not, it's just I and doesn't really mean much. So there we go. Everything's working. Beautiful. Okay, so now that everything's working, I want to move on into the next topic, which is events. Now, in reality, we don't want the links to actually re-render our application, but what we really want to happen is when the links are clicked on, for us to capture that process and then do something with it. Now, we don't want to create here callbacks inside of each nav element. It would really work much better for us if we could do it externally from here. So I'm going to go ahead here and just create on link click, and it's going to be an event, and I'm going to go ahead here, and I'm just going to, for right now, I just want to do a console log hello, just get it to run. So what I'm going to do on our on click here, what I'm going to do is in the navigational elements that I'm sending in, I'm going to append also an on click, and our on click navigational element will basically bound inside of it are this dot on click. Now again, if we wanted our on click to work, we would need to bind it, because we want to keep reference to this when we're inside of here. To do that, we would want to go in our constructor, just like we did in our portfolio, I believe, where in our portfolio item we had your we updated basically calling our constructor. So let's just do it again inside of our nav, calling our constructor, creating one. Once we created it, we have to call super and send our props in, because we want to make sure that our props continue to work. And any element that we expect to be a callback, then we'll just go ahead here and set it to bind to itself, making sure that anytime it's called, it will treat the this as the this that we want it to be treated as. Now, our on-click event is going to be sent into our nav element, and one of the beauties is because, although we don't have here a beauty, because we set all of our on-click is basically going to be captured here on our eye itself, but it's not going to be captured on our href. So to make sure that it gets captured on our href as well, we probably would want to also go inside of here and set here an on-click, and our on-click, by the way, I think it's lowercase, I'm not sure. Well, let's set it uppercase and we'll see what happens. And on on-click, I want to go ahead and send it to this.props.on click, literally passing through our callback. So our callback is going to be set inside of our nav item, and then it's going to capture it in our A. Now, if everything works according to plan, if I save this and I go back to my app, whenever we click on a navigational element, we should see here an update with hello, which is exactly what's happening. Now, the one thing that I want to do is I want to kill or stop this default functionality that's happening right now, because what I really want to happen is I want this to flow even further up the chain. So really, I don't want to control the navigation up here. Actually, where I want to control it is all the way on the top, on our application itself. So again, to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and cut this out really for a second, move it all the way into my app, and in my app itself, I'll have an on link click or on nav, Oh, you know what? On link link, why not? On link link, on link link. Okay, so that if that's good and I accept that on link click, I need to send that on link click to our menu. So I'm going to set here an on click, and I'm going to go ahead and again, remember that we have here a binding that is set automatically. So we will have a this that relates to our full app whenever it's called. All I have to do in my nav is make sure that instead of having that callback that I had up there below, that I'm sending the this.props.on click. So what I'm literally doing is I'm passing it along the line, making sure that it's continuing to implement that item. Now, once I've done that, I'm going to go into my app. And again, you could do this in many layers. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I don't really want my navigation to have a state. I don't want it to know what state it's at. While our application definitely needs to know its state, which is going to be the next thing we're going to be working on. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to move everything to the central place where the state will be able to control both how the navigation would look like, but also what elements will be rendered, because we don't want portfolio, about, and contact rendered. We want them to dynamically render based on where we clicked on or where we are currently inside. So with that said, let's just make sure that everything is working, and I'm going to go ahead here into my on-click link area, and I'm just going to ask the default to not happen. So e.prevent default. Now, if everything worked according to our hopeful plan, our prevent default, what it should do is basically whenever it's going to be clicked on, it should basically not do anything. So if right now we're in the portfolio and I click into about, then we should see the hello, but it shouldn't jump. Beautiful, which is exactly what we wanted it to do. And generally speaking, what we've just done right now is exactly the way you want to work when you're working with your components. Don't have states for every single component, but instead of that, try to find where is the most logical place for the state to happen. In our case, the navigation, although changing, really is going to affect what is going to happen within all of the application. So the state that really needs to change is something that's happening within our application that then could re-render our navigation based on that change and re-render all the other remaining items. Okay? If that makes sense. So we'll continue the next lecture, and don't worry, it makes a lot of sense once you'll see it all connected. In this lecture, we really were introduced to how you're most efficiently working with events in React. And again, React is all about making things transparent and obvious, and the same is true with the bubbling of events. In the next lecture, we're going to merge our model with our view to make it easier for us to create dynamic views, basically redefining what's going to actually sit inside of our client, mimicking in many ways the business logic.